Good afternoon, church. Today is Friday of Jesus' last week. Today is so well known as Good Friday. We struggle with that word because we often have a hard time making a connection between what happened to Jesus on his Friday and how that was somehow good. And we know it's good for our benefit, but there's a lot that's not good on Friday. It really breaks our heart, and today's word is agonizing. We've really come a long way. Jesus was being acclaimed on Sunday, coming into the city with shouts of Hosanna and palm branches being laid down. People were submitting their authority to King Jesus, and now this day is very agonizing. Jesus has come a long way, and a lot has changed in just 5 days. Of course, very, very early in the morning, in the wee hours Friday morning, Jesus was praying there in the Garden of Gethsemane. He told his disciples who were there that his time has come, the hour is near, and Judas, who was an apostle of Jesus, he was one of his followers that Jesus went and chose. Judas came with a battalion of guards, and the guards were sent to arrest Jesus. And Judas walked up to Jesus and he planted a kiss on his cheek because he told the battalion, "Now the one I kiss is the man you're looking to arrest." There was a fight. There was some aggression there. Peter, remember, took his sword out and cut off the ear of a man named Malchus. And Jesus swiftly condemned Peter for that and said that you're my soldiers, you're my disciples. We do not fight in that way. Put your sword back. Jesus actually gave his hands up, and he gave himself up freely for arrest. He did not resist at all when these soldiers came to arrest him. Jesus is tried in court. He's tried in a Jewish high court, tried by the Sanhedrin. His crime is blasphemy. They've said that since he called himself the Son of God, then he has made himself equal to God. That wasn't okay. That's made him guilty of blasphemy. His punishment is that he should die for those crimes. The Romans will not let the Jews, will not let the Sanhedrin put Jesus to death. So the Jews drag Jesus in before the governor in Rome, Pontius Pilate. Pilate tries Jesus. He questions Jesus. He finds no fault in him. He finds no blame that can be laid at Jesus, and he says Jesus hasn't done anything wrong. Jesus, in the midst of all this, is beaten very badly. We can talk about the different weapons that are used against him. Cat of nine tails. He's just beaten and torn bloody. The Jews still want to execute Jesus. Pilate, even though he found no flaws in Jesus, is feeling threatened by the Jews because at times before they have complained to Caesar in Rome about some of the governors around the area, and Pilate does not want the Jews to complain about him and file anger against him. And so what Pilate does is he takes a bowl, he takes a basin of water, and he washes his hands and kind of symbolizes that he claims no guilt for what they're about to do. He said, "My hands are free. You do with them what you want. I'm not any part of this." And he says, "What do you want me to do?" And they say, "Crucify him." And even Pilate offers another criminal by the name of Barabbas. He says, "Who do you want me to release for you? Barabbas, or do you want me to release for you Jesus?" And they cry out, we want Barabbas to be released. Pilate has Jesus crucified, ordered to be crucified upon a cross. This is probably the most painful death that we can ever imagine. It's more than the railroad spikes being driven into Jesus' hands. It's more than having your back being torn apart, which many people would not have survived the scourging. It's the whole idea of not being able to breathe on the cross. And I remember in college we were assigned to read a book like this. It's from Martin Hengel called Crucifixion. It's very detailed, but it gives a lot of the information about what a crucifixion was like. This is not an easy read. It's not a pleasant read. In fact, I'll open this book up from time to time, and I want to put it right back because it is it's very difficult to read and to think that Jesus went through some of the pain that he went through. Jesus makes 7 statements from the cross. And I love that we have these statements recorded because it shows the heart of Jesus in all of this. Jesus makes these statements who did not otherwise speak up in his defense, but he spoke up in his grace. He said, for one, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He prayed to his Father to forgive the ones who were crucifying him because he says that they don't know what they're doing. He's praying for their forgiveness. He said to the thief who was hanging nearby, he said, today you will be with me in paradise. He cares about others who are suffering, doesn't just care about himself. He tells his Father, he prays to his Father, he says, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. He looks down at his mother and he says, woman, behold thy son. And he looks at John and he says, behold thy mother. In other words, he's making sure that his mother has someone to protect her and take care of her after Jesus is gone. This is very human. Jesus cries out, I thirst. He is very much enduring the pain on a physical level. He's enduring all this pain that's come against him. Spiritually, think of this pain. My God, why have you forsaken me? Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. Can you imagine if your son was hanging on a cross in danger and he called out and you could see your son hanging there? Which dad, which parent among us would not reach down and grab our sons up to do everything in our power to save the lives of our sons? We sing that song that he could have called 10,000 angels. God would have sent a legion of angels to redeem his son back, to protect him from this pain. And God looks away from Jesus in this time. He cannot look upon the sin of the world, which is now being placed on Jesus. And Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's because of the sin that Jesus has incurred on himself, not sin of his own. Jesus is separated from God at that moment. Nobody has ever, from the beginning of creation, nobody has ever been that far from God in this life. And yet, God's own Son was forsaken by God. He cried out, 7th, it is finished. All the work that his Father had sent him to do, the mission that he was to accomplish is now finished. Everything was complete and fulfilled. I'm reminded of that passage in Isaiah 53, like a sheep before his shears is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Jesus did this willingly, without speaking up in his defense. A man by the name of Joseph of Arimathea asked to receive the body of Jesus to be buried, and he, along with Nicodemus, took Jesus' body in public, and they had it buried in a new tomb. Jesus had people who loved him, and Jesus had people who really did believe in him and care about him. We're thankful for the example of Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, who we get to see his salvation journey through the Gospel of John. It's overwhelming, isn't it? I don't know what I could say that hasn't already been said to thank Jesus or to recognize the cost of what he paid. Why would he go through that? Jesus as he's being executed, would fall down under the weight of the crossbeam. He had people spit on him. He's doing the kindest thing that anyone's ever done, only to have people spit on him, to spit in his face. And so they mocked him. Oh, he says he's a king. Let's put a purple robe on him. Let's put a crown on him. And they put a crown of thorns, and the blood flows down his body. Why does he do that? I wasn't even born yet. And yet he knows that I would one day sin. I was going to sin early and often. Why does he do that? Why would Jesus die in such a painful way? I think Jesus died the way he did, and I think he endured the pain because he knew exactly the kind of person I was. He knew exactly how I would rebel against him. He knew exactly how I would reject him. All the more reason he needed to give his life for me to be saved. You see, I was sinking. I was drowning. And I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry, and from the waters lifted me. Now safe am I.